Thank you for inviting me to talk a little bit about this afternoon and what's some of the things that are going on within the industry. I'll try to hit some of the highlights. One is to continue our advocacy efforts. I think those of you who have attended this meeting in the past know that we've talked about some of the things we've done advocate-wise. Some of our communication efforts that we're dealing with fund and support research. So those are the three things that I'm going to cover. And I will say in advance that those of you from our provincial friends that are here, you probably take a break right now, because what I'm going to talk about is what's happening in Washington with the transportation bill, which has absolutely nothing to do with you. I apologize for that. Some of you DOT folks might not be interested in it either. But I think also that there's a lot of industry people here who are wondering what's happening, and I can tell you the short end of the story is we don't know either, but I'll try to cover some of it. So we have a contract with a firm in Washington. We've had it since 2009. We worked very hard to get language in Map 21, the things that Jason covered, the 35 times that it's mentioned in the law. We were very active in that, and we continue to be active because we want to make sure that all of the work that we did in terms of Map 21 doesn't get erased for whatever reason, and whatever emerges in terms of a new transportation reauthorization bill. So we continue to have meetings recently as this month in Washington, trying to find out what are the thoughts, what's some of the issues, etc. So if you follow the papers at all and you're interested in this particular area, you probably know most of this anyhow, with the exception that I put these slides together last Thursday night. And if you follow the news that's coming out of Washington, besides the Pope being there, you know that the Speaker of the House resigned on Friday, which just throws this whole thing into turmoil, because some of the things that I'll show you on the slide are just no longer correct. But I'll cover those. Senate passed a bill in July. Congress passed the 2-month extension of Map 21 that was due to expire on July 31st. So that was to provide the House time to work on a bill. Keep in mind that there's other things going on in terms of work within the Congress, like the import-export bill, a lot of other things, the FAA bill. So this is not the only thing on everybody's plate. But Congress now needs to reauthorize Map 21, which expires on October 29th. And most likely, according to our tea leaves, they will probably kick the can down the road again, and there'll be another extension into December. And I'll kind of hit why that might happen. I mentioned this, the Senate passed a bill called the DRIVE Act, which, I think they have these people in Congress, or at least they hire people in agencies that come up with these acronyms. And then they think of the acronym, and then they try to fit the words to fit what it stands for. But you see, DRIVE meaning Developing Roadway Infrastructure for a Vibrant Economy Act, or DRIVE. It provides 6 years of program, but only 3 years of funding. And it continues many of the existing Map 21 policies, such as the development of performance standards, asset management plans, and more importantly to us, pavement preservation. That's not going to be affected in the DRIVE Act. It means, as I said, maintains eligibility for pavement preservation activities. Some of the new major programs you may be excited about, maybe you aren't. Major Projects Program, National Freight Program, and more importantly, probably streamlining of federal permitting and environmental review. That's been on the table for a long, long time. It finally shows up in the DRIVE Act. As I mentioned, the Transportation Infrastructure Committee is drafting a long-term bill. Most everybody thinks that long-term is 6 years. At least that's what they've been shooting for. And there may be a bill introduced as soon as next week. They're working on it. But what happened last Friday now kind of throws a wrench into that as to whether, in fact, there will be a bill introduced, and I'll go into a little bit more on that. The big thing is, and the elephant in the room, is where's the money going to come from? How do we fund this bill? Whatever bill emerges, however for long it is, and there will be, of course, compromises necessary and conferencing done between the Senate and the House in order to make it happen. Money's the big deal. House Ways and Means Committee, which is chaired by Representative Ryan from Wisconsin, has focused on financing this reauthorization bill by bringing back international tax reform, which means that those U.S. multinational companies that have money overseas that they don't want to bring back into the U.S. and pay taxes on, there's a process by which they would lower that tax rate and make that happen. That's the plus side. The negative side is it only happens once. And so from terms of a long-term funding apparatus, that isn't going to do much. As I said before, the DRIVE Act is funded for 3 years, even though it's a 6-year program, which the House has found unacceptable at this stage. As I said, the bills will be conferenced if they get that far. You may know that there's also this issue about the government shutdown, which would take place December 10th. And if you read the newspapers at all and read about the things that have been going on, there's probably going to be some kind of a continuing resolution to fund the government so it doesn't shut down. Now, there are some people who are betting against that, to say that, well, there's a lot of feelings out there that we don't like things the way they're working in Washington, and the best way to get at that is to shut the government down and start all over. There's other folks that say that that may make some sense from a position-wise, but from a practical point of view, it's not very good. There's a lot of conflicting reports on the solvency of the Highway Trust Fund. You may have read that the Congressional Budget Office issued a report in July or August saying, well, wait a minute, the HTF is not going to be out of money until July of next year. Well, a couple weeks ago, there were some other reports that came back and said, oops, we made a mistake in some of our calculations, and that's not the case. It's going to run out of money sooner than that. A major issue in terms of potential funding is, can Congress pass an international tax reform? Typical tax reform bills take 3 or 4 years to work their way through the House and the Senate, and to think that it's going to happen between now and December, probably not. Where's the money going to come from? Where it's come from in the last 7 or 8 continuing resolutions, and that's from the general fund. There's 13 legislative days left. Now, remember I said October 30th, there's 13 days what the Congress is actually going to meet between now and October 30th. It's almost certain that there will be a short-term extension. There's lots of feeling that, I'll put a caveat on it in a minute, but if the reauthorization bill can be passed by mid-December, as you see, if funding is identified. And the smart money in Washington now is saying long-term is probably going to be 3 years and not 6. And more importantly, I suppose, than anything that you may be aware of, is that gas tax is off the table. It's no longer being discussed as a funding mechanism to carry forth the Highway Trust Fund. Now, what's interesting is, in terms of the Speaker's resignation on Friday, is that he has made it very clear that he wants to wipe a couple things off the table before he resigns October 30th. And those two issues are the highway bill, or the transportation bill, and the Import-Export Bank. And he would like to have his legacy, at least the input that we get, he'd like to have that legacy, get those things off the table before he leaves. Now, you think about it, there's 13 legislative days left. There's no bill yet from the House. There's a Senate bill. When there finally something emerges, they have to find money, then they have to conference the bill. Both houses have to pass it in 13 days. Now, if you're a betting man, or a betting woman, pardon me, you're probably not going to bet that that's going to happen. But that's a possibility. Repatriation is a word that's typically used in the press regarding this, the international tax. As you see here, this is kind of summarizing it. That's possible but not probable. Probably a 3-year bill. Funding is a stumbling block. So that kind of brings you up to date with a lot of our advocacy effort. We continue to work with Federal Highway to help us define the definitions and pavement preservation techniques that appeared in the Justice Department's memo regarding the Americans for Disability Act a year ago, definitions versus the definitions adopted by the Pavement Preservation ETG. Specifically, there are, if it's considered to be a maintenance treatment, you don't have to comply with the ADA law. If it's considered an alteration, you do. Slurry seal is considered a maintenance activity. Microsurfacing is considered an alteration. And we've been trying to get that changed, but Federal Highway, both the legal part and asset management, continue to ask us for data to support that issue, meaning what's the impact? And we haven't been able to gather much data outside of California to give us a good handle at this stage what the economic impact is of slurry seal versus microsurfacing. Communication efforts. We publish a quarterly journal. We have a lot of interesting information in those journals, case histories, product spotlights, that type of thing. We also have a website. We annually award a Excellence in Pavement Preservation Award called the Jim Sorensen Award. This year, we will be awarding it to the City of Los Angeles for their program. That was just decided a couple weeks ago. We will be going to Los Angeles and making that presentation to them. We typically would do it at a meeting like this, but they would like us to come there and do it, so I guess we will. We participate as well in the expert task group, as you've heard, and also participate industry-wise now. I'm talking about not just me, but industry members on the expert task group, as well as members on the emulsion task force, which we hope will end up being part of the expert task group. So those are some of the communication efforts in addition to our website, the Sorensen Award, our involvement with several of the ETGs and so forth. You've heard a little bit about MnRoad and NCAT. I'm not going to cover an awful lot, but I'll cover some of it, and you'll see here what the reason for that is. If you have been around the preservation business for a while, you know that in 2012 at NCAT, they were constructed a number of test sections on a county road leading into a quarry and an asphalt plant, rather small, 100-foot sections. And as a result of that, because it was done in warm weather area, it was considered to be, well, it may work in Alabama, but it ain't gonna work in North Dakota. Well, the point is that this collaboration between NCAT and MnRoad is really aimed at addressing putting those pavement treatments in both warm and cold climates for both flexible and rigid pavements. Now, the National Center for Asphalt Technology doesn't have any concrete pavements, but MnRoad does. So, I mean, that's the idea. And it's been a collaboration that's been working on it for over a year and a half now to see how we can make these things work. Taking a look at what happened on Lee Road, what did we find out? The final report has not been published, but these are some of the findings. Crack sealing improves cracking performance. Differences between route and fill and blow and band in terms of crack sealing. The routing and fill worked much better. Scrub seals exhibit both crack and chip seal benefits, where there was scrub seal was put over top of a chip seal, called in some cases is not truly right, but a cape seal. A chip seal, the data shows that it slowed oxidation as compared to control. We have finally have some actual numbers to show that. And the numbers are not only related to the chemistry of the binder and the underlying material, but it also relates to the performance characteristics of it, testing in some of the performance measures. Treatments reduce subgrade moisture. We have moisture probes that went down to the subgrade, and in just about every instance, there was an improvement in allowing moisture into the subgrade by putting these treatments on. The life extending benefit curves, which is one of the outcomes of the project, is developing now. They're currently in the process of doing that. And the idea was behind this next section that was built several weeks ago, was to extend the data collection on this Lee Road as part of the existing 2015 contract, which will be done. So we're a full funding partner with 13 other states in the process, in the project. US 280, 4-lane, 17,000 ADT roadway near Auburn is in the 2015 study. And I think about 10% trucks, but I don't remember the exact number. And then Min Road, because the contract got done about mid-August, it wasn't going to be feasible to move and get the contractor to move all his equipment to Minnesota from Alabama in order to meet Minnesota's requirements and their specifications for the application of chip seals, microsurfacing, et cetera. That work will be done in 2016. Contributors that supported our work at NCAT are listed here. We like to make sure we know that those folks have made funds available for us to contribute. If you aren't aware, each year of the study requires $120,000 on the part of everybody participating. So this is a $360,000 effort on the part of industry's piece, and we certainly appreciate the people who have helped make that happen. So here we have Auburn University, and here we have the work that was done on Lee Road, and here we have the NCAT track, and this is US 280. And then Minnesota, I'm not sure, Jerry knows better than I do what they finally decided on facilities up there, but I know that they've been working on that. The track sponsors, in terms of the states that are involved, there were two studies. One is a cracking study, and the other is the pavement preservation study. So if you count the states up there that are kind of in purple, they're not going to come up to 13. They're going to be more than that because the other states decided that they wanted to participate in the cracking study and not the pavement preservation study. But we have a pretty good representation, and talking to Dr. Powell at NCAT the other day, who was the main facilitator of all this work. If there are other states that are interested in joining the group, you're more than welcome to do so. So just because the 13 states here doesn't mean it can't grow. US 280, 4-lane highway, I mentioned the traffic on it. These are the treatments that were placed. The first test sections on Lee Road were 100 feet long. These were 1/10 of a mile placed on US 280. So you'll see here a whole laundry list of various treatments that were placed there, pretty similar treatments, things that you're very, very familiar with, some things that you may not be familiar with. In terms of then, when most of these, if I'm not mistaken, were all what we would consider emulsion treatments, whereas these treatments are essentially 4.75 nominal maximum size aggregate treatments on some type of material. There was also some cold in place recycling, whether it was a central plant mixed or mixed on the project. We were considering doing some HIR, but it became problematic as to, number one, could we mobilize equipment if there wasn't any work in the area? And secondly, how could we do 528 feet with that long train? So unfortunately, HIR kind of fell out of the scheme on the work. So crack sealing, I mean, that's pretty partial to most what we do anyhow. So we did crack sealing. We didn't do any routing. It was decided by the people who supply the equipment and the products that this was not, routing wasn't necessary. The cracks were tight enough on this section. In addition to verifying and calibrating the equipment at a calibration site near the NCAT track, when any treatments were placed, whether they were chip seals or whatever, you notice the pads that were placed here right before the chipper goes over the top. Those pads were collected and verifying the application rate, in addition to all the calibration that was done probably 2 hours before at the calibration site. So that, as well as the amount of emulsion that was shot, and the visqueen you see here, the plastic, was to get them started on the actual application of the 528 feet. That's just a shot of some of the team, people from FP2 that were there to participate in some of the study. As I mentioned, the facilitator is Auburn. That's probably not the right word, but NCAT. And then the prime contractors, Vance Brothers, and they also have other subcontractors working for them on the project. You saw some of them already. So it was pretty much of a combined effort from a lot of people. If you think about those, about 25 or so sections were placed in 4 days. You know from your experience with construction activities that you better have your act together if you want to get it done, you want to get it done right. And there's no question that the people that were bid the work, Vance Brothers in this case, and all the subs that worked for them, did a marvelous job of getting it down, not only quality, but getting it down the right way. These are our contributors. I always end up with this, people who, whether corporate sponsors or sponsoring associations, that help us do some of the things that I've just told you that we do year-round and trying to promote the pavement preservation industry. So with that, I will be here through an entire meeting. If you got questions for me about anything we do, or whether, if you don't like it, let me know, or if you think other things, I'll be glad to be here and answer them. So thank you.